You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 6,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. The cathedral smelled like burning hair and something older. Something that reminded me of the formaldehyde they used in my high school biology class, mixed with the copper penny taste of fear. That was my first coherent thought as I sprinted through the catacombs beneath St. Michael's Cathedral. My boots splashing through puddles of liquid that was too thick to be water, too warm to be anything natural. The sword strapped across my back felt heavier with each step, like it was drinking in the wrongness that saturated the air down here. Behind me, the thing that used to be Father Adrian Wolfe was singing. Not screaming, not growling, singing. A lullaby, actually. In a child's voice, high and sweet and pure. The kind of voice that belonged to Christmas pageants and First Communions. Completely at odds with the wet, scraping sounds of his body as it dragged itself along the vaulted ceiling above me, like some obscene insect. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." I risked a glance backward and immediately regretted it. Father Wolfe's body clung to the stone ceiling, but gravity had stopped meaning anything to him hours ago. His limbs bent in directions that rewrote the rules of anatomy, elbows that hinged backward, knees that folded sideways, fingers that had too many joints. But worst of all was his head. It was rotating, slowly, continuously, making a full 360-degree revolution every few seconds like some nightmare carnival ride. And each time his face came around to look at me, he wore a different expression. A child's gap-toothed grin of innocent joy, an old woman's knowing smirk, a predator's hungry leer with too many teeth, a lover's tender smile, a corpse's empty stare. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." His voice never wavered, never stopped, even as his mouth contorted through those different expressions. The sound came from somewhere else, from his chest maybe, or from the walls themselves, or from the space between heartbeats where nightmares live. My lungs were burning. I'd been running for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Time moved strangely down here, stretched and compressed like reality itself was being digested by something with a stronger stomach. The corridor I was following opened suddenly into a wider chamber, and I saw it, the iron door. It shouldn't exist according to any cathedral blueprints, any city records, any architectural survey. But there it was, ancient and massive, every inch of its surface covered with Latin, inscriptions so old they predated the church itself. Words of binding, words of sealing, words that were supposed to keep something locked away forever. A dead end. Perfect. I spun around, my hand already moving to the sword strapped across my back. The leather-wrapped handle was warm. Warmer than it should be. Warmer than my body heat could account for. The moment my fingers wrapped around it, pain lanced through my palm, like I grabbed a hot coal. The cross embedded in the blade near the hilt was glowing. Not the soft, comforting glow of candlelight. This was harsh and white and absolute, like staring directly at an arc welder. The light exploded outward as I drew the weapon, turning the catacomb into a landscape of absolute blacks and blinding whites, with nothing in between. And in that merciless illumination, I finally saw the full horror of what Father Adrian Wolfe had become. He hung from the ceiling directly above me, maybe 15 feet up, his body configured in a way that made my brain hurt to process. His cassock, the simple black vestment he'd worn every day for 23 years, had fused with his skin. Fabric and flesh had merged into something that pulsed with its own obscene life. Veins of black thread running through grey tissue like a diseased root system. His arms and legs had elongated, joints multiplying, bones breaking and reforming into new configurations that allowed him to grip the stone ceiling with 6 points of contact instead of 4. Extra joints meant extra angles, meant a way of moving that no human spine should permit. But his face, God help me, his face was the worst part. His eyes weren't rolled back white like I'd initially thought. They were gone, removed, replaced. Where his eyes should have been, there were mouths. 2 tiny mouths in his eye sockets, each filled with infant teeth, small and white and perfect. And they were moving independently, whispering different prayers in Latin. The left mouth recited the Paternoster. The right mouth spoke the Ave Maria. Both prayers backward, both prayers wrong. His actual mouth hung open, jaw unhinged like a snake's, and from his throat came that sweet child's voice still singing that lullaby. And if that mockingbird don't sing. Behind him, filling the corridor like a grotesque congregation, stood the 20 parishioners he'd corrupted. But they weren't standing, not really. They hovered 6 inches off the ground, toes pointed downward like hanged corpses, bodies swaying in perfect unison to a rhythm I couldn't hear. Their heads were bowed as if in prayer, and from their mouths dripped something luminescent and wrong, a substance that glowed pale, green, and smoked when it hit the stone floor. Wolfe's head finally stopped its continuous rotation and locked onto me, all 3 of his mouths, the eye mouths and the real mouth, simultaneously curving into smiles. "Brother Dominic," the child's voice said, but now it came from all 3 mouths at once, creating a harmony that made my teeth ache and my vision swim. "We've been waiting for you. Did you know you taste like copper and starlight? We've been sampling you through your dreams for weeks now. Every nightmare you've had since you decided to come to Seattle, that was us, learning your flavor, preparing the feast." My hand tightened on the sword until my knuckles went white. The cross was so hot now it was starting to blister my palm, but I didn't let go. Couldn't let go. "Adrian," I said, surprised at how steady my voice came out, "if there's anything left of you in there, the real you, the man who took vows 23 years ago, fight it. I can still help you. It's not too late." All 3 mouths laughed in different pitches, soprano, alto, tenor, creating a chord that resonated in my chest cavity and made my heart skip a beat. The 20 hovering parishioners behind him tilted their heads back in unison and laughed too, their voices joining the horrible harmony. "Help," the child's voice said, but now I could hear other voices underneath it, layered like sediment. An old man's wheeze, a woman's sultry purr, something that might have been animal or might have been something that had never been alive in the first place. "Oh, Dominic, Adrian doesn't want help. He invited us in. Begged us, actually. Got down on his knees in a stone temple in the Carpathian Mountains and literally begged us to fill the emptiness inside him." Wolfe's body began to move, unfolding from the ceiling joint by joint, each movement accompanied by wet popping sounds as cartilage rediscovered flexibility it shouldn't possess. He descended toward me like a spider lowering itself on silk. Except there was no silk, just his body reorganizing itself to accommodate gravity's belated reassertion. "Do you want to know what broke him?" the voices asked, that child's soprano still dominant, but the others growing louder. "What made a man of God? A good man, a truly good man who'd spent his entire adult life in service, open himself to us?" "No," I said, but I was lying. Of course I wanted to know. I always wanted to know, needed to know, because understanding why they fell was the only way to predict who would fall next. "We'll tell you anyway," Wolfe said, and now he was standing in front of me, standing properly, feet flat on the ground, though his knees were bent backward and his spine curved in a way that would have paralyzed a normal human. It was a child, a little girl named Emma Castellano, 8 years old, leukemia. The eye mouths stopped whispering their backward prayers and fell silent, waiting. Adrian prayed over her every single day for 6 months, the voices continued. Performed last rites 3 separate times when her heart stopped. Each time the doctors brought her back. Each time she was a little worse, a little more hollow, a little less Emma, and a little more cancer wearing a child's face. Wolfe's body was still reconstructing itself, bones settling into new positions. He was taller now, had to be nearly 10 feet tall, and thin, stretched out like taffy. His cassock skin rippled with movement underneath, things crawling and writhing just below the surface. Adrian prayed so hard, fasted, mortified his flesh, went on pilgrimage, did everything the church says a faithful priest should do when he needs divine intervention, and God stayed silent. Perfectly, absolutely, completely silent. The real mouth, the original mouth, opened wider, and I saw something moving in the back of his throat. Many things, squirming. So, on the day Emma died, the day her mother screamed in Adrian's face that he was useless, that his prayers were empty words, that God was a lie or a monster or both, Adrian went back to his rectory and prayed to something else, anything else, whatever was listening. And Dominic? Wolfe leaned down, bringing those eye mouths close to my face. I could smell his breath, rot and roses, corpse flowers and incense. We answered. He lunged. I barely got the sword up in time. The blessed steel caught him across the shoulder, and where it connected, his flesh didn't just burn, it screamed. Individual voices, hundreds of them, thousands of them, all shrieking in agony as the holy light seared away layers of corruption. I heard children crying, women wailing, men begging for mercy. The sound was so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. But Wolfe barely slowed. His arm extended, joints multiplying along its length, stretching like taffy. His hand, if it could still be called a hand, clamped around my throat. His palm was covered in tiny circular mouths, each the size of a dime, each filled with tiny teeth. They latched onto my skin immediately, not biting but drinking. Not drinking blood. Something else, something deeper. My vision swam, colours bleeding into each other. Images flashed through my mind in rapid succession, every person I'd killed, every corrupted priest I'd put down, their faces twisted in final agony. Father Leopold in Hungary, who'd screamed that I was the real monster as I drove the sword through his heart. Sister Maria in Argentina, who'd whispered thank you as she died. Father Isaiah in Louisiana, who'd laughed and laughed and laughed until the flames consumed him. The sword felt impossibly heavy in my hand. My faith, the thing that powered the blade, that made the cross glow, was being drained directly from my soul through those feeding mouths on Wolfe's palm. Yes, Wolfe whispered, and his voice came from my own throat now, borrowed from the essence he was drinking. Yes, we can taste it. 11 dead priests, 11 murders, committed in God's name. You tell yourself they weren't human anymore, that you were putting down rabid animals, that you were protecting the innocent. His face moved closer, close enough that I could see into those eye mouths, see the tiny tongues writhing inside like worms in a corpse. But we can taste your doubt, Dominic. It flavors everything. You wonder if you're the real monster. You wonder if those priests could have been saved. You wonder if God watches your work and weeps, or if he's simply not watching at all. Would you like to know the answer? The sword was slipping from my fingers. My legs were giving out. The rosary in my pocket, the simple wooden rosary I'd carried since my ordination 13 years ago, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Would you like to know if God will forgive you for the things you've done in his name? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The mouths on Wolfe's palm were drinking deeper now, pulling at something essential, something that made me, me. Wolfe's 3 mouths, the eye mouths and the real mouth, All smiled in perfect synchronization. He won't. Something inside me broke. Not faith. I could feel that still burning somewhere deep in my chest. A small ember that refused to be extinguished. No, what broke was something else. The shell I'd built around myself. The armor of righteousness I'd worn for 6 years. The certainty that I was doing the right thing, that my actions were justified, that the ends justified the means. It shattered like glass, and underneath, I found something I'd forgotten existed. Compassion. Not for myself, for Adrian Wolfe, for the man who'd spent 23 years trying to serve God, only to watch a little girl die in agony. For the priest who'd been so desperate to hear someone, anyone, answer his prayers that he'd opened himself to things that should never be let in. With my free hand, the one not holding the sword, I reached into my pocket, not for holy water from the Jordan River, not for blessed salt, not for any of the weapons Cardinal Torino had armed me with. I pulled out my rosary, simple wooden beads worn smooth by 13 years of daily prayer. No blessing from a pope, no special ceremony, just a string of beads I'd bought at a gift shop when I was ordained, beads I'd held through every prayer, every doubt, every dark night of the soul, when I'd wondered if any of this meant anything. And I began to pray, not the formal prayers of the church, not Latin incantations or exorcism rites, not even the rosary prayers that the beads were designed for. Just the words I'd said every single night since I was 5 years old, before I understood theology or doctrine or the weight of vows, before faith became complicated. Now I lay me down to sleep. The effect was instantaneous. The mouths on Wolfe's palm released their grip with a wet, sucking sound. He stumbled backward, his elongated arms retracting, joints snapping back into their original configurations. The eye mouths in his face, those horrible, whispering mouths, clamped shut like closing wounds. No, Wolfe said, but his voice was different now. Less harmony, more discord. Like the different voices inside him were arguing, fighting for control. No, that's not, those are just words. They don't mean anything. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. The 20 hovering parishioners dropped to the ground like someone had cut their strings. They landed in crumpled heaps, gasping, their eyes clearing from solid black to human colours, brown and blue and green and hazel. Alive, still alive. Wolfe screamed, a sound that came from all 3 mouths at once and shook the foundations of the cathedral above us. His body began to convulse, the corruption inside him writhing and struggling like it was trying to escape his skin. If I should die before I wake. I stepped forward, still clutching the rosary in one hand, raising the sword with the other. The cross on the blade wasn't just glowing anymore. It was blazing, burning brighter than I'd ever seen it. So bright I should have been blinded, but somehow wasn't. I pray the Lord my soul to take. The light from the cross exploded outward, filling the entire chamber. Not white like before. This was golden, warm, like the first light of dawn after the longest night. It washed over the 20 freed parishioners, and they shuddered, but didn't burn. It washed over me, and I felt something in my chest. That small ember of faith suddenly roared back to life, and it washed over Father Adrian Wolfe. Where it touched him, the corruption simply dissolved. Not destroyed or banished or exorcised, just unmade as if it never existed at all. The extra joints in his limbs vanished. The eye mouth sealed over, leaving smooth skin. His cassock separated from his flesh, becoming just fabric again, tattered and stained, but just fabric. He fell to his knees, suddenly just a man, just a tired, broken man in his late 40s with grey hair and haunted blue eyes. "Dominic," he said, and it was his voice, his real voice, without any harmony or layering or wrongness. "Please kill me. I can feel them trying to come back. I can hear them whispering. Don't let me become that thing again, please." I lowered the sword. "No. Please." Tears streamed down his face. "You don't understand. I invited them in. I wanted this. I was so angry at God, so betrayed, and they promised me power and purpose, and I took it. I damned myself willingly. There's no saving me." "You're wrong," I said quietly. "You didn't damn yourself. You made a terrible choice in a moment of unbearable pain. There's a difference. I killed 8 people." His voice broke. 8 members of my congregation. I drained their faith to feed those things. I turned them into husks. How is that not damnation?" I knelt down beside him, still holding the rosary in my burned hand. The wooden beads felt warm, but not painful. Comforting almost. "Because you're asking for forgiveness," I said. "Because you want to be saved. Because somewhere underneath all that corruption, the real Adrian Wolfe survived. The man who dedicated his life to serving God. Who prayed over a dying child every day for 6 months. Who still believes that redemption is possible, even for himself." Behind us, I heard movement. The 20 parishioners were stirring, helping each other stand. None of them seemed to remember much. I could see the confusion on their faces, the disorientation. That was a mercy, at least. Wolfe looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen in any of the corrupted priests I'd hunted before. Not defiance, not hatred, not the empty void of something pretending to be human. Hope. "You can save me," he whispered. "After everything I've done, after everything I've become." "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never tried before. For 6 years, I've hunted priests like you, and I've killed every single one of them. 11 dead men whose faces I see every time I close my eyes. I told myself it was necessary, that they were too far gone, that there was no other choice." I pressed the rosary into his hand. His skin was still grey. In places, veins of black threading through it like infection. But it was fading, slowly, the corruption retreating. "But I've been wrong about a lot of things," I continued. "Maybe I've been wrong about this too. Maybe the sword isn't the only answer. Maybe faith isn't just a weapon. Maybe it's supposed to be a lifeline." Wolfe closed his fingers around the rosary, and the moment he did, the remaining corruption in his body recoiled. The black veins pulled back like living things trying to escape. His skin began to regain its colour, the grey fading to healthy pink. "It burns," he gasped. "The beads, they're burning the corruption away." "Hold on," I said. "Don't let go. No matter how much it hurts, don't let go." He didn't. He clutched those wooden beads like they were the only real thing in the universe. And maybe in that moment, they were. Maybe faith. Real faith. Not the grand theology of the church, but the simple belief that somewhere, someone is listening, is the realest thing there is. The corruption fought back. Wolfe's body convulsed, his back arching, his mouth opening in a silent scream. For a moment, those eye mouths tried to reform, splitting through his eyelids like cancerous growths. The things inside him, the entities that had nested in his soul for 3 months, were trying one last time to maintain their grip. But they were losing. The golden light from the sword's cross intensified, and I realized something. The light wasn't coming from the sword. It was coming from Wolfe, from his clasped hands, from the rosary, from the faith he'd rediscovered in his moment of absolute desperation. The eye mouths sealed shut permanently. The black veins vanished entirely. His skin became fully human again. And then, with a sound like a door slamming shut, the corruption was gone. Simply gone. Cast out. Unmade. Father Adrian Wolfe collapsed forward, and I caught him before he hit the stone floor. He was sobbing. Great, racking sobs that shook his entire body. But they were human sobs. Clean sobs. The sobs of a man who'd seen the abyss and been pulled back from the edge. "Thank you," he whispered against my shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I held him while he cried. This priest I'd come to kill but had somehow saved instead. And as I held him, I felt something in my chest, that weight I'd been carrying for 6 years, the weight of 11 murders, finally begin to lighten. Maybe Torino was right. Maybe I would break my heart trying to save them instead of kill them. But God, it felt so much better than breaking my soul. The 20 parishioners had gathered near the tunnel entrance, helping support each other. None of them quite sure what had happened, but all of them alive. I caught the eye of one of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, and she nodded to me. A silent thank you. I nodded back. "Can you walk?" I asked Wolfe. He pulled back, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his tattered cassock. "I think so. I feel empty. But not the bad empty. Like I've been cleaned out. Hollowed and ready to be filled with something better." "That's exactly what you are," I said. I helped him to his feet, steadying him when he swayed. "We need to get out of here. This whole structure is unstable. The catacombs are going to collapse." As if summoning it, a deep rumbling shook the chamber. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. The iron door behind us shuddered in its frame. "Everyone," I called to the parishioners. "We need to move now. Follow me." I led them back through the tunnels, Wolfe leaning on me for support, the 20 others following close behind. The rumbling grew louder, more insistent. Behind us, I heard the sound of stone giving way, of ancient foundations finally surrendering to time and damage. We climbed the 147 steps back to the sacristy, my legs screaming in protest. The parishioners helped each other, forming a chain of human compassion up those worn stone stairs. Wolfe moved like a man in a dream, his lips moving in silent prayer. We reached the top just as the collapse intensified. The door to the catacombs buckled and cracked. I shoved the last person through into the sacristy, a teenage boy who couldn't have been more than 17, and dove through after him just as the stairs gave way completely. The entire floor of the sacristy buckled and heaved. The walls cracked, but it held, barely. We spilled out into the main cathedral, and for a moment we all just stood there, breathing hard, grateful to be alive. The massive space was empty and cold, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the stained glass windows. The building groaned around us, settling, accepting the damage it had sustained. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, scanning the group. 20 heads nodded, though all of them looked shell-shocked, traumatized. They'd need counseling, probably years of therapy, but they were alive. Wolfe stood apart from the group, looking up at the massive crucifix above the altar. His lips were still moving, in silent prayer, and tears continued to stream down his face. I pulled out my phone and called 911. "There's been an incident at St. Michael's Cathedral. Structural collapse in the basement. Possible gas leak. We need ambulances and fire department. 21 people on site, all ambulatory, but in shock." The operator asked questions. I gave vague answers. Yes, everyone is safe. No, no one is critically injured. Yes, we'll wait outside for emergency services. I started herding the group toward the exit, getting them out of the unstable building. They moved slowly, helping each other, still too confused to ask proper questions. That was good. The confusion would make it easier to control the narrative later. Wolfe was the last to move. He stood before that altar, before that crucifix, and he spoke loud enough for me to hear. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I broke my vows. I betrayed everything I believed in. I let darkness into a place that should have been safe. If I spend the rest of my life atoning, it won't be enough. But I'll try. God help me, I'll try." I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, Adrian, we need to get you outside." He turned to me, and his eyes were clear, really clear, for the first time since I'd arrived in Seattle. "What happens to me now? Prison? Execution? The Vatican's judgment?" "I don't know," I admitted. "That's not my call. But for what it's worth, I'll tell Cardinal Torino what happened here. that you were infected, corrupted, but that you fought back, that when given the choice between feeding the darkness and embracing the light, you chose the light. That has to count for something. And if it doesn't? I looked at the sword on my back, at the rosary still clutched in Wolfe's hand. Then I'll fight for you, the way I should have been fighting for all of them from the beginning. We walked out of the cathedral together, priest and hunter, both of us damaged, but somehow still standing. The night air was cold and clean, and after hours in the corruption-soaked catacombs, it tasted like redemption. The 20 parishioners were gathered on the cathedral steps, staying close together, drawing comfort from proximity. I could hear sirens approaching, growing louder. Soon this place would be swarming with emergency responders, police, reporters. What do we tell them? Wolfe asked quietly, about what really happened. Nothing, I said. We tell them there was a gas leak in the basement, that you were conducting a late-night prayer service when the floor gave way, that everyone got out safely through quick thinking and God's grace. That's a lie. It's a simplified truth. The real truth would break their minds. Let them have their simple explanation. Let them sleep soundly. We carry the weight so they don't have to. Wolfe looked at the 20 people he had almost destroyed, people who were alive because we'd stopped him in time. Is this what it's like, being you? Knowing the truth but never being able to share it? Every single day, I said. Welcome to the other side of the veil, Father Wolfe. It's lonely here, but at least you'll have company. The first ambulance arrived, followed quickly by fire trucks. Paramedics swarmed the group, checking vitals, asking questions. I faded back, becoming just another priest in the chaos, easily overlooked. A fire captain approached me. Father, were you inside when it collapsed? I was helping evacuate people, I said, which was true from a certain perspective. Is everyone accounted for? 21 people total, including you and Father Wolfe. Anyone else in the building? No, everyone's here. You're lucky. Structural collapse like that could have killed everyone down there. It's a miracle. I thought about that word. Miracle. Was that what had happened tonight? Or was it just faith, determination, and a choice made at the crucial moment? Maybe there wasn't a difference, and I stayed until they'd loaded everyone into ambulances, until the building was secured, and the immediate danger had passed. Then I slipped away, walking down the hill toward my hotel through streets that were starting to come alive with the first hints of morning. The sky was lightening in the east. Dawn was coming to Seattle. I was halfway back to my hotel when my phone rang. The encrypted one, Cardinal Torino. I answered. It's done. Father Wolfe, his voice was tight, expectant. Saved. A very long silence. I don't understand. We've never, in 700 years of documented hunts, we've never saved one. We've only stopped them. Then maybe we've been doing it wrong for 700 years. Another silence, even longer. When Torino spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Something I'd never heard from him before. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the catacombs, about Wolfe's transformation, about the well and the entities and the 20 corrupted parishioners. I told him about the moment when I realized that killing Wolfe would just add another ghost to the 11 already haunting me. I told him about the rosary, about the simple prayer, about how faith, real uncomplicated faith, had burned away the corruption when the blessed sword alone couldn't. And I told him about Father Adrian Wolfe weeping in my arms, a broken man who'd been given a second chance at redemption. When I finished, Torino was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him processing everything I'd said, weighing it against centuries of church doctrine and hunter protocol. 6 years, he finally said. 6 years I've sent you to kill corrupted priests. 6 years of turning you into an executioner. 6 years of telling myself it was necessary, that there was no other way. And it took you this long to teach me that I've been approaching this all wrong. You didn't know, I said. Neither did I, until tonight. But I should have known. I should have questioned. I should have tried. His voice broke slightly. How many have we killed unnecessarily, Dominic? How many could have been saved if we'd tried? We can't change the past, I said gently, but we can change how we move forward. Yes, we can. I heard papers rustling, the sound of him making notes. I'll need to brief the Pope, revise the protocols, inform the other hunters. This changes everything. It might not work every time, I warned. Wolfe was 3 months into his corruption, earlier than most, and there was enough of him left inside to fight back. Some priests might be too far gone. Some might not want to be saved. But we have to try, Torino said firmly. Even if we fail 99 times out of 100, that one saved soul is worth it. You've shown us that. What about Wolfe? What happens to him now? Torino was quiet for a moment. Officially, he died in the collapse. That's the story we'll maintain. The man who was corrupted is dead. That's true enough. But the man you saved, will bring him to Rome. There's a monastery in the mountains north of the city, a place where priests go when they need to heal from spiritual wounds. He'll spend time there, recovering, learning to live with what happened to him. And if he can find peace, perhaps eventually he can serve again. And if he can't find peace, then at least he'll have a chance to try. That's more than we've offered anyone before. I reached my hotel and sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. My wrist ached where Wolfe had gripped it. My throat burned where those feeding mouths had latched on. But I was alive, and more importantly, so was Adrian Wolfe. Rest, Dominic, Torino said. You've earned it. Take as long as you need. A week, a month, whatever it takes to recover. 3 days, I said automatically. 3 days isn't enough. 3 days, I repeated, because somewhere out there, another priest is hearing whispers. Another man or woman of God is starting to lose their way. And the old me would have waited until they were a full-fledged monster before stepping in. But the new me, I want to catch them earlier, before they cross the point of no return. You're going to burn yourself out, Torino said quietly. This work, it takes a toll, even on the strongest of us. I know, but someone has to do it. And right now, I'm the only one who's figured out how to save them, instead of just killing them. So, until I can teach the others, until we can change how the hunters operate, I'm not stopping. Torino sighed. Very well, but promise me something, Dominic. Promise me you'll remember that you can't save everyone, that sometimes killing will still be necessary. Don't let your compassion blind you to danger. I promise, I said. I'll try to save them, every single one. But if they've gone too far, if there's nothing left to save, I'll do what needs to be done. I'm a hunter first, a redeemer second. Good. God be with you, Father Hayes. And also with you. I ended the call and sat there for a long time, staring at the sword leaning against the wall, at the rosary coiled on the nightstand. 2 different tools, 2 different approaches. Maybe I'd need both going forward. My regular phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks. You'll be there this year, right? Please say yes. The kids keep asking about Uncle Dominic. I stared at that message for a long time. 3 weeks. Could I make it? Or would I be chasing another corrupted priest, fighting another battle, saving or killing another lost soul? I typed back, I'll try. Can't make promises with work, but I'll do my best. She responded immediately with a series of heart emojis and a photo of my niece and nephew holding a hand-drawn "We miss you, Uncle Dominic" sign. My eyes burned. When was the last time I'd seen them? 6 months, 8 months? They were growing up without me, living normal lives while I waded through darkness on their behalf. Was it worth it? Was all of this worth it? I looked at the news on my phone. Already the story was breaking. Structural collapse at St. Michael's Cathedral. All 21 present. Escape unharmed. They were calling it a miracle. A blessed outcome. Proof that God protects His faithful. They had no idea how close they'd all come to something infinitely worse. No idea that, without intervention, Father Wolfe would have opened a door that could never be closed. No idea that their continued existence was owed to a priest with a sword and a string of wooden beads. And they never would know. That was fine. Better than fine. Let them sleep soundly. Let them believe in simple miracles and divine protection. The truth that their safety depended on people like me, hunting monsters in the shadows, would only steal their peace. I set the phone aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My body was screaming for sleep, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept seeing Wolfe's face. Not the corrupted version with those eye mouths, but the human one. The moment when he'd looked at me with such desperate hope and asked if he could really be saved. I'd said yes without knowing if it was true. I'd gambled everything on the possibility of redemption. And it had worked. But what if it hadn't? What if my compassion had gotten me killed? Gotten those 20 people killed? What if next time I tried to save someone who was too far gone, and they succeeded in opening whatever door they were reaching for? Could I live with that responsibility? Could I afford not to try? I must have fallen asleep eventually, because when I opened my eyes again, it was late afternoon. The sun was setting, painting my hotel room in shades of orange and gold. I'd slept for nearly 12 hours, dreamless and deep. My body still ached, but it was a manageable pain now. I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably reporters trying to get a statement about the cathedral collapse. I ignored them all. One message from Cardinal Torino. Father Wolfe arrived in Rome 3 hours ago. He's at the monastery, asking for you. Wants to thank you properly, when you're ready. I typed back, tell him he doesn't owe me anything. Tell him to focus on healing. I'll visit when I can. Then I showered, changed into clean clothes and sat down at the small desk in my hotel room to write. I'd started keeping a journal after my first hunt, documenting everything. Not for the church. They had their own records. This was personal. A way to process what I'd seen, what I'd done. A way to remember the faces. I wrote about Father Adrian Wolfe, about the little girl named Emma Castellano, who died of leukemia, about a good man pushed past his breaking point by silence and suffering, about 20 parishioners who'd been saved, about the moment I'd realised that killing wasn't the only option, that faith could be a lifeline instead of just a weapon. And I wrote about the future, about what came next, about how I'd need to teach the other 6 hunters this new approach, about how the church would need to restructure its entire understanding of corruption and redemption. It was a lot to carry. But I'd been carrying heavy things for 6 years. What was a little more weight? My encrypted phone buzzed. New assignment already. I stared at it for a long moment before opening the message. Miami, Father Gregory Nash, Our Lady of Mercy Parish, Danger Level 3, Early Stage Corruption Suspected, multiple parishioners reporting disturbing dreams after confession. One attempted suicide, survived. Nash returned from Haiti 3 months ago. Since then, increasing focus on blood atonement in sermons. Local reports of animal mutilations near church grounds. Preliminary assessment, feeding behaviour, power building. Recommend immediate deployment before escalation. Remember new protocols. Save first, stop second. 3 months. Always 3 months. That seemed to be the incubation period. The time it took for corruption to take root and begin spreading outward. I looked at my calendar. If I left tomorrow, I'd have 2.5 weeks before Thanksgiving. Plenty of time to assess Nash, attempt an intervention, and either save him or stop him. Plenty of time to miss Thanksgiving if things went wrong. I thought about my niece and nephew with their hand-drawn sign. I thought about my sister who'd been covering for me for years, telling extended family that I was doing important missionary work, that I was serving God in ways I couldn't discuss. She wasn't wrong, but the truth was so much darker than she imagined. I typed back to Torino, deploying to Miami tomorrow morning. We'll assess situation and attempt early intervention. If Nash is willing, I'll try to save him before corruption advances. His response came quickly. Understood. I'm briefing the other hunters on Seattle. Word is spreading. You've given us hope, Dominic. Don't lose yourself chasing it. I set the phone aside and walked to the window. Seattle spread out below me, lights beginning to twinkle as evening fell. Millions of people going about their lives, working, loving, dreaming, completely unaware that last night, in the catacombs beneath one of their churches, something terrible had almost been unleashed. But it hadn't been, because I'd stopped it, because I'd found another way. Somewhere in Miami, Father Gregory Nash was conducting evening mass right now, standing at his altar, raising the Eucharist, speaking prayers that were probably already starting to twist, to change, to become invitations instead of blessings. And he didn't know what was happening to him, didn't understand that the whispers he was hearing weren't divine inspiration, but something older and hungrier. Didn't realize that he was slowly being hollowed out and filled with something that wore his face while consuming his soul. The old me would have waited, would have let the corruption advance until Nash became an undeniable threat, would have travelled to Miami with the sword ready and the determination to kill. But the new me, the me who'd held Adrian Wolfe while he wept, who'd watched corruption burn away in the light of simple faith, that me wanted to catch Nash earlier, before he killed anyone, before he became a monster, while there was still enough of the real man left to save. I spent the evening preparing, cleaned and oiled the sword, recharged my phones, packed my duffel bag with the usual supplies, holy water, blessed salt, my journal, clean clothes, and the rosary. Always the rosary now. Before I went to sleep, I called my sister. Dominic! Her voice was bright with genuine joy. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Did you get my text about Thanksgiving? I did. Listen, Sarah, I'm going to try to make it. I really am. But I have a work situation that might complicate things. Another mission trip? She'd learned not to ask too many questions years ago. Where this time? Miami. There's a priest down there who needs help, spiritual guidance kind of thing. You always were good at that. Warmth filled her voice. Even when we were kids, you were the one people came to when they needed to talk. Remember when Tommy Peterson's dad died, and you sat with him for 3 hours in our treehouse? You were only 12. I did remember. Tommy had cried until he couldn't cry anymore, and I just sat there with him, not saying much, just being present. Sometimes presence was enough. That was a long time ago, I said. Not that long. You're still that person, Dom. Still the one who helps people when they need it most. I'm proud of you. Even if I don't understand exactly what you do, I'm proud. My throat tightened. Thanks, Sarah. Just promise me you'll be careful, and try to make it for Thanksgiving. The kids really do miss you, and so do I. I promise I'll try. Love you. Love you too. I ended the call and sat there in the darkness of my hotel room, thinking about treehouse conversations and dead fathers, and the simple act of being present for someone in pain. Maybe that's all redemption was. Being present, bearing witness, refusing to walk away when things got hard. I could do that. I'd done it for Adrian Wolfe. I could do it for Gregory Nash. I fell asleep that night with my hand wrapped around the rosary, my lips moving in silent prayer, not asking for protection or power or divine intervention, just asking for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to heal, when to draw the sword and when to offer the beads, and for the strength to live with whatever choice I made. I arrived in Miami on a Thursday afternoon to oppressive heat and humidity that hit me like a physical wall. Seattle's gentle rain was a distant memory. This was the kind of weather that made you believe in hell, not the metaphorical one, but the literal place of fire and suffering. Our Lady of Mercy Parish was in a mixed neighbourhood, half gentrified condos, half stubborn, working-class houses that refused to be pushed out by rising property values. The church itself was beautiful, in that faded way old Florida buildings often are. Spanish colonial architecture, white stucco walls, red tile roof, a bell tower that rose against the impossibly blue sky. From the outside it looked peaceful, welcoming, but I could feel it the moment I stepped onto the grounds. That subtle wrongness, the way the air tasted slightly off, the way shadows seemed a little darker than they should be in the bright afternoon sun. The sword on my back grew warm, not hot like it had been with Wolfe. This corruption was newer, less advanced, but it was definitely there. I'd done my research on the flight. Father Gregory Nash, age 47, ordained 22 years ago. Originally from Chicago, served parishes in Illinois and Wisconsin before transferring to Miami 5 years ago, known for his work with recovering addicts and domestic violence victims. By all accounts, a good priest, a caring priest, until 3 months ago when he'd returned from a humanitarian mission to Haiti. The church had no record of approving any such mission. Nash had simply taken 2 weeks of personal time and disappeared into the Haitian countryside. When he'd returned, he'd been different, quieter, more intense, and his sermons had taken on a darker tone. Less talk of God's love and mercy, more focus on suffering as a path to enlightenment, on sacrifice as the ultimate expression of faith, on blood as the price of redemption. And then the animals had started dying, cats and dogs at first, then larger animals, a goat, a pig, a horse, all of them found drained of blood, arranged in patterns that local santeros recognized and refused to discuss. One parishioner, a woman named Claire Rodriguez, had attempted suicide after attending Nash's confession. She'd survived, thankfully, and was now in psychiatric care, but she kept insisting that Father Nash had shown her the truth and that the only escape was death. Classic early-stage corruption. Nash was feeding the entities inside him, building power, preparing for something bigger. But he probably didn't even realize it yet. He probably thought the whispers were inspiration. The hunger was devotion. The darkness was divine. That's how it always started. The corruption was subtle, gentle even. It didn't announce itself as evil. It wore the mask of enlightenment, of deeper truth, of connection to something greater. By the time the host realized what they had invited in, it was usually too late. But maybe not for Nash. 3 months was early. If I could reach him, talk to him, show him what was happening, before it advanced too far. Maybe I could save number 12. I walked through the church grounds, noting everything. The flowers in the garden beds were wilting despite regular watering. I could see the wet soil, but the plants themselves looked diseased. The statue of the Virgin Mary near the entrance had developed a crack that ran down her face like a scar. And the birds, I realized I couldn't hear any birds. In Florida. In the afternoon. That was wrong. The church doors were open, inviting. I stepped inside and was immediately hit by the cold. Like St. Michael's in Seattle, the temperature inside was at least 20 degrees lower than outside. But unlike St. Michael, which had felt wrong cold, this felt sad, cold, mournful almost. The interior was lovely. Stained glass windows depicted various saints, their faces serene and compassionate. Wooden pews worn smooth by decades of use. An altar of pale marble with fresh flowers. Roses, though they were browning at the edges, and behind the altar, kneeling in prayer, was Father Gregory Nash. He was tall and thin, with dark hair going grey at the temples. His cassock hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight recently, I noted. His hands were clasped in front of him, head bowed, lips moving in silent prayer. I stood at the back of the church and watched, waiting, assessing. The corruption wasn't visible yet, no physical transformation like Wolfe's, but I could sense it, could feel it radiating from him like heat from a furnace. It was in the way shadows clung to him a little too closely, in the way the candles near the altar flickered when there was no breeze, in the way the air around him seemed to shimmer slightly, like reality was having trouble maintaining its grip. After several minutes, Nash stood and turned around. His eyes found me immediately, and I saw them widen slightly in recognition. Not recognition of me personally. We'd never met. But recognition of what I was. Predator recognizing predator. "Can I help you, Father?" His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of a Chicago accent. "I don't believe we've met." I walked down the center aisle, my hand instinctively moving toward the sword on my back before I stopped myself. Not yet. I was here to save, not kill. "Father Dominic Hayes," I said, offering my hand. "I'm visiting from the Seattle Archdiocese. Thought I'd stop by and introduce myself." Nash's eyes narrowed slightly, but he took my hand. His grip was cold, much colder than it should be, and I felt something probe at me. Not physically, something deeper, testing my defenses, tasting my faith. I pushed back gently but firmly, and whatever it was retreated. Nash's smile tightened. "Seattle, that's quite a distance. What brings you to Miami, Father Hayes?" "Vacation," I lied smoothly. "Needed some sun after all that rain. Thought I'd visit a few parishes while I was here, see how other parts of the country operate." "I see." Nash released my hand and gestured to the pews. "Please sit. Would you like some water? It's brutally hot today." "Water would be great, thank you." He disappeared into the sacristy and returned with 2 bottles of water. We sat in the front pew and I took a long drink, grateful for the cold liquid. Nash held his bottle but didn't drink, just turned it slowly in his hands. "Seattle," he said again. "St. Michael's Cathedral, by any chance? I heard there was some incident there recently. Structural collapse?" So he was following the news. Interesting. "Actually, yes, I was there when it happened. Miraculous that everyone survived." "Miraculous," Nash echoed, and something in his tone made it clear he didn't believe in miracles anymore. Or perhaps just fortunate timing. Sometimes I think we give God too much credit for simple luck. There it was. The doubt. The crack through which corruption had entered. "You don't believe God intervenes?" I asked carefully. Nash was quiet for a long moment, staring at the crucifix above the altar. "I used to. I believed absolutely. Prayed constantly. Trusted that God had a plan, that suffering had meaning, that faith would be rewarded. And now? Now I believe God is silent because he's not there. Or if he is there, he doesn't care. Either way, the result is the same. We're alone in our suffering." His words were almost identical to what Wolfe had said in the catacombs. The entities that corrupted priests didn't have many tricks, but the ones they had worked reliably, find a faithful servant of God, show them suffering that goes unanswered, whisper that there's another way, another power, something that actually responds, wait for them to crack. "What happened in Haiti, Father Nash?" He stiffened, his knuckles going white around the water bottle. "I don't know what you mean." "You took a personal trip 3 months ago. When you came back, things changed. Your parishioners have noticed. Your sermons are darker. You seem troubled." "I'm fine." "Father Nash, Gregory, I'm not here to judge. I'm here because I've seen this before. I know what it looks like when a priest starts to lose his way. when faith becomes doubt and doubt becomes something worse. Nash stood abruptly, his water bottle falling to the floor. It landed with a plastic crunch but didn't spill. The water inside had frozen solid. We both stared at it. "You need to leave," Nash said, his voice tight. "Now." "I can help you," I said, standing slowly, keeping my movements non-threatening. "Whatever you're experiencing, whatever you think you found, it's not what it seems. It's using you, Gregory. It's feeding on your doubt and your pain, and it's turning you into something you don't want to be." "You don't know anything about what I want." Nash's voice cracked, and for a moment I saw something behind his eyes. Multiple somethings. Watching, listening. The corruption was more advanced than I'd thought. It had already established multiple entities inside him. They were just being subtle, staying hidden, not announcing themselves yet. "You went to Haiti looking for answers," I said quietly. "You were tired of prayers, going unanswered. Tired of watching people suffer while God stayed silent. So when something offered you an alternative, you took it. Am I wrong?" Nash's jaw clenched. There was a temple in the mountains outside Port-au-Prince. The locals wouldn't go near it, said it was cursed. But I went. I needed to understand. I needed to know if there was anything else out there, anything that actually listened. And something answered. "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. They sang to me, showed me things. Truths about the universe that the church has been hiding for centuries. They offered me power, knowledge, a way to actually help people instead of just offering empty platitudes. And what did they want in return? Nash looked away. Nothing, just faith, just belief, just a willingness to open myself to them. That's not nothing, Gregory. That's everything. Every time you open yourself to them, they take more. Every prayer you corrupt, every parishioner you touch, they grow stronger. And eventually there won't be anything left of you, just them wearing your face. "You're wrong," Nash said, but his voice shook. "I'm still in control. I decide what happens. I'm using them, not the other way around." "Is that why your hands are shaking? Why you haven't slept properly in weeks? Why you can't stand to touch the Eucharist without gloves?" Nash looked down at his hands. They were indeed trembling. He shoved them in his pockets. "Get out. Get out of my church. This isn't your church anymore, Gregory. You know that. Deep down you know you've already lost it. Lost yourself. But it's not too late. I can help you. I can show you how to fight back, how to reclaim what they've taken." "How?" The word came out desperate, cracking. "How could you possibly help me? You don't understand what they've shown me, what I've become." "I understand more than you think." I pulled out my rosary, let it dangle from my hand. 3 days ago in Seattle, I saved a priest who was exactly where you are now. Father Adrian Wolfe. He'd been corrupted for 3 months, just like you. He'd opened himself to entities from beyond, just like you. He thought he was in control, just like you. Nash stared at the rosary like it was a snake. "What happened to him?" "I helped him fight back. The corruption was burned away. He's in Rome now, recovering, healing, learning to live with what happened, but not letting it define him." "That's impossible. Once you invite them in..." "It's not impossible. It's hard, painful. It requires faith. Real faith. Not the kind the church preaches, but the kind that comes from your core. From that part of you that still believes despite everything. But it's possible." Nash's legs seemed to give out. He sat heavily on the pew, his head in his hands. "I don't have that kind of faith anymore. That's the problem. That's why they were able to get in. My faith died in Haiti watching children starve, while their parents prayed to a God who never came." I sat beside him, keeping the rosary visible. "Your faith isn't dead, Gregory. Just buried, under pain and doubt and anger. But it's still there. I can feel it. That's why the corruption hasn't taken you completely. That's why part of you is still fighting." I don't know how to fight them. They're in my head all the time, whispering, promising, tempting, telling me that suffering is the only truth, that blood is the only real prayer, that I need to prepare my congregation for something greater. My blood ran cold. Prepare them for what? Nash looked up and his eyes were wet with tears. I don't know. They haven't told me yet, but there's a ceremony 2 weeks from now. They want me to bring the congregation together for a special mass. All of them. Everyone who's ever trusted me. 2 weeks, right around Thanksgiving. What happens during this mass? I don't know, Nash's voice broke, but I dream about it every night. I see blood, so much blood, and I see myself standing in the center of it, transformed into something glorious and terrible, and I see the door opening and them coming through. He stopped abruptly, his hand flying to his mouth. I shouldn't have told you that. They're angry now. They're saying I've betrayed them. They're saying... Nash's body convulsed. His eyes rolled back, showing white. When he spoke again, it wasn't his voice. It was many voices, layered and harmonized, speaking in perfect synchronization. The hunter from Seattle. We wondered when you would come. Adrian's faith burned so bright when you freed him. We felt it from here, felt the door slam shut, felt our brothers cast back into the dark. You think you can do the same for this vessel? I stood, my hand moving to the sword. I know I can. The many voices laughed. No, this one is ours. We've nested deeper, planted our seeds in the fertile soil of his despair. You're too late, hunter. But we thank you for coming. Your faith will make an excellent feast when we finally consume it. Nash's body stood, but his movements were wrong. Too fluid, too graceful, joints bending at angles that suggested something else was piloting him now. His head tilted to one side, far enough that I heard vertebrae pop. Leave now, the voices said through Nash's mouth. Leave while we still permit it. Come back in 2 weeks and join the congregation. We promise you'll find the ceremony illuminating. I'm not leaving without him. Then you'll die with him. Nash's body lunged with inhuman speed. I drew the sword. The cross exploded into brilliant light and swung. The blessed steel should have struck true, should have burned away corruption like it had with Wolfe. But Nash moved faster, contorting his body like a gymnast, and my blade whistled through empty air. He landed behind me, his cold hand gripping the back of my neck. I felt those familiar feeding mouths forming on his palm, preparing to drain my faith. I spun, drove my elbow into his solar plexus, broke free. He stumbled back, laughing with multiple voices, his eyes still rolled white. Yes, fight, make it interesting. Adrian surrendered so easily, but you'll make us work for it. I held the sword in front of me, the cross blazing. Gregory, I know you're still in there. Fight them. Don't let them use you like this. For just a moment, Nash's eyes flickered back to normal. Brown eyes, terrified and desperate. I can't, they're too strong. I'm sorry. Then the white returned, and he attacked again. We fought through the church, him moving with impossible speed and strength, me relying on training and the sword's holy light to keep him at bay. We crashed into pews, shattered candles, sent the altar flowers flying, and with each exchange I realized something terrifying. The corruption in Nash was different from Wolfe's, more refined, more controlled. Wolfe's entities had been savage, overwhelming, consuming their host in a frenzy of transformation. But Nash's were strategic, patient, preserving most of his humanity while they slowly prepared him for whatever they had planned, which meant they were older, more experienced, more dangerous. I couldn't kill Nash, but I also couldn't let him walk away, not if he was planning some kind of mass sacrifice in 2 weeks. So I did the only thing I could think of. I dropped the sword. Nash's body froze mid-lunge, confusion flickering across his possessed features, and I pulled out the rosary, The effect wasn't as dramatic as it had been with Wolfe. The corruption didn't burn away, didn't dissolve in golden light, but it recoiled, pulling back like a snail retreating into its shell. Nash's eyes cleared. He gasped, stumbling, catching himself on a pew. What happened? You're still in there, I said, advancing slowly with the rosary held out. The real Gregory Nash is still fighting, but you're losing. Every day, they take a little more. In 2 weeks, there won't be anything left of you to save. Then what do I do? Tears streamed down his face. Tell me how to fight them. Tell me how to get them out. I thought about what had worked with Wolfe, the simple prayer, the core of faith underneath all the theological complexity. But Wolfe's corruption had been newer, less entrenched. Nash's entities had dug in deep, fortified their position. This was going to take more than a childhood prayer. You need to come with me, I said, right now. We'll go to Rome, to people who understand this. They'll help you fight, help you reclaim yourself. I can't leave my parish. Your parish is in danger as long as you stay. You know that. The ceremony they're planning, it's not salvation, Gregory. It's slaughter. They're going to use you to kill everyone who trusts you. Nash's face crumpled. No, I won't let them. I won't. His body convulsed again. The white returned to his eyes. The many voices spoke, and this time they sounded angry. Enough. You've interfered enough, Hunter. This vessel is ours. The ceremony will proceed. And if you try to stop it... Nash's hand moved to his pocket, pulled out a small knife. Before I could react, he pressed it against his own throat. We'll kill him ourselves rather than let you have him. Is that what you want? Another dead priest on your conscience? Or will you walk away and let us have what's ours? My mind raced. If they killed Nash, I'd failed. But if I walked away, hundreds of people might die in 2 weeks. There had to be another option. Had to be some way to... I'll make you a deal, I said slowly. The many voices laughed. You have nothing we want, Hunter. I have my faith, my belief. You said it yourself, it burns bright. Strong enough that you've tasted it from miles away. What if I offered you a trade? Me for him. Let Gregory go and I'll open myself to you instead. The entities inside Nash went very still. The knife remained pressed against his throat, a thin line of blood already trickling down his neck. You would volunteer? Willingly invite us in? If it saves him, if it prevents the ceremony, yes. Nash's lips curved into a smile that was all predator. Interesting. But why would we trust you? The moment we release this vessel, you could break your word. I'm a priest. My word is binding. I'll take a vow, a sacred vow, to open myself to you if you release Gregory Nash completely and abandon whatever you're planning for his congregation. The entities considered. I could almost feel them thinking, calculating, weighing the offer. Then Nash's body began to laugh, deep, genuine laughter that shook his frame. Oh, Hunter, do you really think we'd fall for such an obvious trap? The moment we left this vessel and entered you, you'd destroy us. You've done it before. You know the technique now. We'd be walking into our own extinction. My heart sank. Of course they saw through it. They weren't stupid. They'd existed for centuries, maybe longer. They'd seen every trick, every trap, every desperate gambit. I was out of options. Then what? I said quietly. We just fight until one of us dies. No, the many voices said. You leave now, and you don't come back. We'll release this vessel's throat and let him live, to complete the ceremony. If you interfere, if you return to Miami before we're finished, we'll kill him immediately, and then we'll find another vessel, and another, until we succeed. And if I leave, what guarantee do I have that you won't hurt him, that you'll keep your word? You don't. But it's the only offer you'll get. Walk away now, or watch us cut his throat. Choose. I looked at Gregory Nash, at the man trapped inside his own body, watching helplessly as entities used him as a hostage. I saw the plea in his eyes when they briefly flickered back to brown. The desperate hope that I'd find some way to save him. But I couldn't. Not without getting him killed. Not without risking hundreds of lives. I had to walk away, had to retreat, regroup, find another approach. It was the smart choice, the strategic choice. It felt like the worst failure of my life. "Fine," I said, my voice hollow. "I'll leave. But Gregory, if you can hear me, don't give up. Hold on, I'm not abandoning you, I'm just getting reinforcements." Nash's eyes cleared one more time. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Then the white returned, and the knife lowered from his throat. "Wise choice, Hunter. Now go, and remember, we'll be watching. We'll know if you try to interfere." I picked up my sword, sheathed it slowly, and walked backward towards the exit. I didn't turn my back on Nash until I absolutely had to. Even then, I could feel those possessed eyes tracking my movement, feel the satisfaction radiating from the entities inside him. They thought they'd won. Maybe they had. I stepped out into the Miami heat and immediately pulled out my phone. Called Cardinal Torino. "We have a problem," I said the moment he answered. "Nash is more corrupted than we thought. Multiple entities deeply entrenched. They're planning some kind of ceremony in 2 weeks, a mass sacrifice of his entire congregation, and I couldn't stop them." Silence on the other end. "Then, what do you need?" "The other hunters, all of them, and any exorcists the Vatican can spare. We're going to need to hit them hard and fast on the day of the ceremony. It's the only way. That's a significant deployment. The Pope will need to approve, then get his approval. Because if we don't stop this, hundreds of people will die, and I won't let that happen. Not after I just proved we can save these priests instead of killing them." "Dominic," Torino said carefully, "sometimes we can't save them. Sometimes the only option is to stop the threat by any means necessary. You know that." "I'm not giving up on him," I said fiercely. "There's still a chance, 2 weeks. That's how long we have to figure out a way to save Gregory Nash and stop whatever those things are planning." Another long silence. "Very well. I'll assemble a team. But, Dominic, if it comes down to a choice between saving Nash and saving his congregation, I'll make the right choice," I said. "I promise." But as I ended the call and stood there in the oppressive Miami heat, staring at the beautiful church that housed such darkness, I wasn't sure what the right choice was anymore. Save one priest or save hundreds of innocent people? Try to redeem one lost soul or prevent a massacre? Hold on to the hope that redemption was possible? Or accept that sometimes killing was the only answer? I didn't know, and I had 2 weeks to figure it out. 2 weeks until Thanksgiving. 2 weeks until I'd either save Gregory Nash or watch him die. 2 weeks to prove that faith, real, complicated, painful faith, was stronger than the darkness. Or 2 weeks to learn that sometimes, no matter how much you believe, the darkness wins anyway. I walked back to my rental car, my hand unconsciously gripping the rosary in my pocket, and I prayed. Not for success, not for victory. Not even for Gregory Nash's salvation, though I wanted that desperately. I prayed for wisdom, for the clarity to know what choice to make when the moment came. And I prayed that whatever choice I made, I could live with it afterward. Because I had a feeling that 2 weeks from now, nothing would ever be the same again. My name is Father Dominic Hayes. I hunt priests who break their vows. For 6 years I was a killer. 3 days ago I became a redeemer. And now I'm about to find out if redemption is truly possible. Or if I've been chasing an impossible dream. God help me. God help Gregory Nash. God help us all.